Hi, Dave. Welcome to the Future Proof Operations podcast.
Hi, Benjamin. Thank you so much for having me.
Dave, great to have you on the show. Could you give me a 60 seconds overview of who you are and what you are doing?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on, Benjamin. Very happy to talk to everyone here today. If you guys don't know me, my name is Dave Griffith. I've spent the last 15 plus years kind of all across automation and manufacturing, almost exclusively within North America, but I've worked with a number of European and German and South American companies over the course of that time. I've done everything from working with large OEMs to going and building and rebuilding a supply chain as an applications engineer in the United States. About 7 years ago, I moved away kind of from that hardware side into what I like to call kind of the software and the data side, and ran a systems integration company for 2.5 years. We focused mostly on the MES, the manufacturing execution systems level. And then at that point, as we'll get into a little bit shortly, I kind of found a lot of reoccurring themes. So 4.5 years ago, my wife and I founded Capelin Solutions, which is what I'm currently doing now. And our focus is to help organizations and groups, mostly manufacturers, go through the process of understanding what their current state problems are. And from that point, going and using tools they have and the people and the knowledge they have at their facilities to solve those problems.
Dave, I'm very much looking forward to our conversation, and we will dive much deeper into the space of manufacturing. Before we do that, you already gave introduction in a nutshell, and I feel that you have a big passion and a big experience for manufacturing in general. How and why did you develop that passion? So where was that starting point?
Absolutely. So Benjamin, especially when I talk to groups of people who are from Europe and not America or North America, I do my best to stay away from what I call Americanisms, right? So things that we say in English and American that are very American. But I feel like the best way to go understand my passion for manufacturing in this is twofold. One, I absolutely love to go solve problems, and I love to be able to work hands-on with people solving problems and seeing what those outcomes are. And two, for my entire life, I've always seen manufacturing as what I call the Wild West, right? And that is hopefully my only Americanism for today, but I will go ahead and describe that, right? It is, at least in varying small to medium groups across America and North America, it is almost like we have left 2024 here today, and we have gone back to, 1950 or 1970. And it's almost like we get to go through the process of reinventing the wheel and just leveraging some common sense and a lot of tools we already have, like cell phones that almost everyone who works at a facility knows how to use and uses every day. We can go make huge strides and increase increase significantly quality of life. And by increasing quality of life for folks at the facility, we can increase the KPIs that end users are interested in, such as throughput, such as downtime, such as quality issues, etc.
Okay, so let's use your passion and your experience to dive into one topic which we want to discuss today. And this is basically an overview or in comparison of two systems which our listeners might know already, which they already saw in the manufacturing floor or in the shop floor. And this is the manufacturing execution system and the connected worker platforms. And what I experience here, having the perspective from Europe or especially Germany, is that, of course, a lot of people are common or they know the manufacturing execution system, but the connected worker platforms are pretty new to the people here in Europe. And when I talk with interesting people like you from United States, I perceive it like the connected worker platform market is already much more mature. And that's why I would like to dive into that discussion and understand how you see that two systems and how they will, for example, collaborate in future, or how they will evolve and get better step by step in the next years. So this as an introduction: manufacturing execution systems and connected worker platforms. First of all, we take a look on the manufacturing execution system. How do you see that? So what are the primary functions of a manufacturing execution system? how does it impact the factory operations? How does it impact the decision making, for example, within the factory?
Absolutely. So MES or manufacturing execution systems. That is kind of one of those words that we have. That if you go into a boardroom, you'll get 12 answers across 8 different people, and none of them will agree as to what that answer is. So, having set us up for that, in general, in MES collects factory data. As I look at it, it's mostly system data, machine data, in addition to sometimes human input data. Although I know a couple of groups who focus very much kind of on that frontline worker input and call that MES. But from my perspective, it's very much how can we go pull that data in from the factory and go understand and quantify what that means. So as we go and we look through that, a lot of it is kind of production, process, and flow control based, which many times is going to have some amount of scheduling included in that, is going to have some of that execution management built in that. Many times, especially in food and beverage and other groups that are regulated, we'll see tracking and tracing, and we'll see tracking and tracing so we can go through the process of understanding where all of our raw materials went, so that we can, if there is a recall or some other issues, we can go and see and read that. And then lots of times there'll be quality involved in there, and recipe, and a bunch of other kind of functions. But having said that, again, everyone kind of defines MES a little bit differently. And then you can see kind of standalone platforms. You can see platforms made for specific verticals, especially automotive, especially pharmaceuticals. You see lots of very specific software and MES suites that have been built for them. And then on the flip side, you'll see very broad MES suites, inclusive of all of your ERPs. So like SAP, Microsoft Dynamics, most of the large ERPs are also going to have some built in, and there is almost no way to go compare those apple to apples. But again, at the end goal is how can we go collect factory floor data to visualize it, to hopefully be able to make decisions to again hit the important KPIs for us.
Yeah, Dave, this is pretty funny. As you said at the beginning, you have 10 people, you ask about the definition of MES, and you get 10 different answers. I experience it completely the same. And somehow it's a little bit strange because it's already a pretty old system or old name. It's already there for a big bunch of years, but different people have different definitions of that MES. Would you agree that the MES in general is more focusing on data and machine connections or machinery connections than, for example, focusing on the human workers within a factory?
That historically would be my definition. I've kind of softened on the definition because I see more groups trying to go pull in that human data, that frontline worker data. So anytime historically I've gone to go look at building an MES, it's been how can we go through this process to build an MES? And while we're doing that, let's make sure that we have the opportunity for humans to input some of that data. But I've seen other groups come and kind of maybe more of a blended MES connected workforce. But again, historically, yes, it's very much kind of machine inputs, system inputs, as opposed to human inputs on the MES side.
Yeah, I find that pretty interesting because I do not get why that is the case. So why did the manufacturing execution system started to, let's say, think about the machinery data from the very beginning? Because human workforce or human workers have been in the factory from the very, very beginning. And then we started to automate and bring more and more robots and machinery into it. So when I ask that question, and I do that here and there, uh, I'm fascinated that we started with the data, but didn't have the workers in mind.
So I think my thought with that and kind of the transition, one of the reasons I see a lot of connected workforce applications and platforms becoming more popular is because in the 70s, right? The 1970s, when we started rolling out PLCs and we started rolling out some not the first automation, but some more automation. We had historically had workers who were going to go work at the same facility for the entirety of their career. So it wasn't, we need to go train a person and it's going to take 3 to 6 months to train. And then
Hmm.
in 12 to 36 months, 80% of this group will be gone. It's this person is probably coming to work at the same place that their dad or their mom and their uncles had worked for an extended period of time. We're probably going to go have them for the next 30 to 50 years, at least in the United States. I know in Europe there are more contracts, and as I look at it, historically in the United States and historically in lots of places, it's like we don't. It's technically an at will place, so you can go leave at any time you want. But most people worked in the same place for their entire career. So I think the focus on collecting machine data and information was because we knew um, the norm, the baseline was we're going to have workers that know what they're doing.
Hmm. Okay, so the systems which are in a factory are focusing more and more on the workers as well. You said there
Mhm.
are some manufacturing execution systems, for example, that are implementing functionalities that are built for the human workforce.
Mhm.
But we have connected worker platforms as well. And they see some kind of hype in the United States. They are getting bigger in Europe as well. What excites you most about their approach to factory operations in general, and of course
Mhm.
to how they interact with human workers?
Absolutely. So there are so many things that excite me about them, Benjamin, but I will try to keep this list short for our listeners here today. I
Yeah.
think it's two or threefold, right? First, I think that we've got the ability and the opportunity to create a knowledge base. And while a knowledge base
Hmm.
is probably not why most people are buying a connected workforce, the ability to go and store and collect some of that information that our longtime workers have and be able to make sure that we don't lose that when they leave and retire, is important today and will only continue to be more important into the future. I think on the technology side, and so most of the solutions I talk about with manufacturers are a combination of operations or operational excellence and technology, and how can we leverage technology. And when we want to go talk about leveraging technology, connected workforce platforms, in my experience, lots of times will run on a phone or run on an iPad, or an app, and everyone knows how to go use those. It doesn't matter
Hmm.
if you're 18 years old and it's your first job and you are addicted to your phone or spend a lot of time on your phone, or if you're 60 years old or 70 years old, the vast majority of those people know how to use applications like Facebook. They know how to go use the internet. They know how to go use YouTube in order to go search and answer those questions. And so the ability to go bring new age technology in, capture the knowledge, and be able to go interact is extremely important. And then the third part is, as I kind of alluded to, the training, right? I see lots of pushback whenever I go talk about connected workforce in facilities. And one of those is, why would I, the person who's been here 35 years, care about going and doing this? And Benjamin, the
Hmm.
conversation is typically, how many times a year do you have to train a new person and go say the same thing time after time after time again? And then they're gone within 6 months. And then you get another new person you have to train those. What if we could go collect that data? What if we could go get the videos and the writings, and then that way we can store kind of the baseline 80 or 90% of it, and then you only have to say it once, and then once we've collected it, we can empower someone to learn the way that they know how to learn. And then if they don't learn it, there's accountability, and we have kind of the standards of what they know. And I have found that that excites the vast majority of the kind of longtime workers of how can we make their lives easier.
Hmm. Dave, you mentioned that it's needed that the workforce can use this kind of software on a smartphone, for example. It should be super easy to use, very easy to adopt. Do you think that could be a differentiator even in the future, that, for example, the connected worker platforms are solving the last mile to the worker, for example, while the manufacturing execution system is somehow the data gathering cloud? How do you see that?
Yeah, I guess I see future state as a combination of we need to go collect our data, right? We need to go collect our data and understand how everything runs. But we also have to understand what we were doing as a workforce when either things went bad, so we can go rebuild what that looks like, or we want to know what happens when we're running the best that we've ever run, so that we can make sure that we know how to do that. And so, in my estimation, I think that we'll still see people collecting machine data. That is as important, if not more important today than it's ever been in the past. But we also need to go collect that workforce knowledge and make sure that we have that connected workforce, so that as we as operational leaders and executives, as we as people who want to make sure everything runs as efficiently as possible and we hit those KPIs, we can go have a full picture as to what happened, as opposed to trying to have everyone remember what they were doing at one particular point in time, which if we go look back at it, we know we're all absolutely terrible at trying to remember that and trying to remember how long everything took.
Yeah. Dave, do you have a success story in mind where we could make it more concrete and say, okay, here has been a specific company and we implemented a connected worker platform and it went out like this and that? Do we have something in mind here?
Absolutely. So I can't say that the particular company name, but I can share with the listeners that I do a lot of work in food and beverage. And I have worked with one orange juice company on and off for the last 4 or 5 years, on a variety of different projects. A couple of years ago, they started implementing a connected workforce platform, and they did that because they had a bunch of seasonal workers come in for orange season. So their headcount would expand by 40 or 50% for a bunch of seasonal workers, because when orange season happens, we've got to go extract all the oils and juices and everything else out of the orange in a very short period of time, or else the oranges go bad and we don't have orange juice that we can make, which of course is a bad thing. So they piloted a connected workforce platform while they were doing that. And they found absolutely tremendous growth and opportunity as they were going through and looking at what those applications look like. In fact, so much so that we decided to go transition that after the end of the season into the normal production line. So I was there working with the operational leaders, the engineering leaders, the production workforce, in order to go get everyone trained on this connected workforce. And as I told you guys the story of how we can go convince those employees who aren't very excited about the potential extra work or using their phone in order to go leverage this tool to go help them. That is a story that comes from one of those particular groups. A couple of guys had been there for 30 to 40 years, and they're like, why would we do this? And going through and talking about what that is. That became a huge win of building that knowledge base. But Benjamin, one of the things I always like to do is go quantify what we're going to do in financial return on investment. So as I was going through, I whenever I go and work on site, I like to work with a bunch of different groups, because I find the differences and being able to get everyone in and bought in on the same piece of technology is important if we want to have this win. So I was talking with the maintenance group, and on an offhanded conversation, it became apparent that the electricians and instrument techs, their biggest issue is if they couldn't solve a problem immediately within the first 5 minutes, they had maybe a 4-inch or 8-10 centimeter stack of papers, which were all of the drawings in a bunch of different languages. And if the drawing they needed wasn't there, they were down for at least 90 minutes every single time, because all of their drawings were just in a whole bunch of different places electronically, and all of the revisions were wrong and all of the problems we knew. So we were able to justify going and digitalizing these drawings on the connected workforce platform, because we could go print out QR codes and put drawings specifically with machines that everything goes to. And so after we went and we put those on the machines. We were able to print out those QR codes. And so the maintenance folks were able to go scan and immediately go pull up all of the drawings they needed. And we estimated initially very conservatively that we'd save at least, 2 to 5%. So upwards of $10 million over the course of a year.
Awesome.
by just that particular item on one line in general. And then, Benjamin, is I kind of like to tell the story. The real opportunity comes when you look at the fact that they were running 3.5 lines full time. And then beyond that, there was a group about 100 miles down the road, about 220 kilometers down the road, that was literally 12 times the size of the group that I was working with. So the opportunities are nearly endless on kind of any of these platforms, as long as we can understand what the problems are and quantify that in ways to find success.
Yeah. Awesome. So you had a big return on invest, and I think this is a pretty good example of how a good technology and a great user interface, a QR code on a machinery can make the life much, much better, the life of the workers for sure. Did you see at the very beginning hesitation at from the workers, and how was it afterwards? So how did their perception change of the whole project?
Absolutely. So there's always hesitation whenever we go start talking about any new platform, especially when we talk about connected workforce or a tool that allows people to use things like their phone. It becomes, oh, we're not allowed to use that, or why would I use that? Or you're just trying to get us to do another thing, and I already have all of these other things that we need to do. So I find it very important to work with the different groups to understand what those pain points are. And what I've found is, if we can solve a couple of the pain points, and if we can solve a couple of the pain points for the leaders of these kind of operations and production facilities, many of them who might be kind of the biggest naysayers or the biggest kind of negative attitudes at the very beginning, if we're able to go turn that around and find ways to turn them into our internal champions, then it turns into the opportunity of, hey, we did this thing because I wanted to do it. It works for me. I want to go find ways to continue to make things that work for me. I am going to go drive the shift. I'm going to go drive the line, drive the group to continuing adopting this because it solves problems for me. And I had a, large part in setting this up.
Thanks for that use case, or for that real life example, Dave. Now let's take a look into the future. We talked about the MES already. We talked about that data aspects of a MES, and we talked about the connected workforce platform and how they reach out, or how they make it much easier for the workforce to interact with this kind of system. And if we now take a look into the future, how do you see the evolution of both, so of MES and connected workforce platform? Will they collaborate even more in future? Will they share some functionalities? What is your perspective on that?
Absolutely. So I guess I continue to see and would imagine that we're going to see many more MES solutions. And I think we're going to go find ways to continue to drive those costs down, so we see small and medium-sized businesses kind of easily being able to go ahead and afford those. And I see it might be a year, it might be a couple of years, but I predict we will continue to find a lot more connected workforce platforms and the adoption of those platforms. I think that we would have to find a group who owns both an MES and a connected workforce platform, or a really good collaboration between a couple of groups, before we see kind of all of that coming together in an easy to see and easy to understand dashboard. Up until that point, I certainly imagine we'll see lots of people exporting or connecting through integrations, connected workforce platforms with MES data, and then trying to overlay that. I would imagine it would become difficult unless all of them had been set up by the same group, or by groups with one very clear vision. Because as Benjamin, I'm sure and I imagine most of our listeners, it's really difficult to kind of go standardize all of that information once everything has been built, especially if we just want an executive dashboard or a couple of dashboards on the
Mhm.
back end. But I certainly imagine we will get there. I'm just not sure how long it will take before we get there.
Yeah. Okay. So both systems will evolve, and I might need two systems when I'm a executive of a manufacturing company. So let's use your statement to get into the final question. Unfortunately, we are coming to the end of this episode,
Mhm.
and let's play a small role game. So I'm a CIO of a manufacturing company. I have around about 1,000 employees. I
Mhm.
have a MES already in place, and I would like to get a better connection to my workforce, which is
Mhm.
working on the factory shop floor. What are key success factors that this implementation of that connected workforce platform will work out? How should I approach that?
Absolutely. So as I look at this, there is the need to go through a selection process, and as I go look at a selection process for any technology tool, it becomes what is important with those tools. What tools do I currently have? And I like to kind of really focus on what sort of KPIs we as an organization are using. And if we were to get into how to select proper KPIs, Benjamin, we'd be here for another, I don't know, until well past this publishes live, right? So hopefully you guys have KPIs that are actually important to the organization and you can focus on the items for the selection process. I would say to go talk about a couple of specifics, this would include, do we currently have devices on the factory floor, right? And if we
Mhm.
do, if they are Android, if they're iPad, if they're perhaps Windows-based handheld computer tablets, go make sure anything that you have is going to work with the systems that you currently have. And so there's a whole bunch of technological in there. Go understand what the important KPIs and what the data and data structure looks like in your MES and your historical manufacturing systems, so you can make sure that when you build this architecture, or hopefully you have a solutions architect that can help make sure that that lines up. And then thirdly, I find it exceptionally important to have a really good rollout plan, right? We could pick the
Mhm.
best or perhaps worst technology that exists, but if we don't have a rollout plan, there is an almost 0% chance of success. So I like to say, start with one particular group. If you are a CIO of a thousand, you said 1,000 employees, so you guys probably have multiple plants, or you probably have a whole bunch of different lines. I would say go figure out what success factors look like in order to pilot these on a specific line or a specific facility. And then once you've gone through that, understand what you need to do in order to get operational buy-in. And lots of time it is going to answer those questions of, why should I do this? And beyond just why should I do this for the production groups, it becomes,
Mhm.
what tangible benefits are there? Is this just an additional thing that I have to do? So go through and understand what tangible benefits you're going to provide to the frontline workforce. And then once you're able to go ahead and do that, you'll find a much easier transition and, I imagine, a success in this process.
Yeah. Awesome. That sounds like a plan. Thanks for that advice, Dave. Unfortunately, we are at the end of this episode. Thanks a lot for being on the show. I really appreciate that. I learned a lot and it was super inspiring. Thanks, Dave. See you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Benjamin.
Bye.